Singapore has long been known for its political stability and smooth governance. But what if real change is closer than we think? With the next election looming, the possibility of a historic opposition gain is no longer a distant theory. It's a real conversation happening across coffee shops, boardrooms, and online forums. If new leadership emerges, it could trigger a wave of changes that touch every part of daily life, from the way homes are bought to how freely people can speak their minds. From housing policies to freedom of expression, from labor laws to political reform, the winds of change may soon reshape Singapore in ways few thought possible. Let's explore the 7 laws that could shift after GE 2025. Housing and HDB reforms won't just be a talking point. They could become ground zero for real change if the opposition gains power after GE 2025. For years, Singapore's public housing system has been praised globally, but rising living costs and runaway resale prices have fueled deep frustration, especially among young Singaporeans trying to get their first homes. A new leadership could push bold, visible changes, expanding grants, revising income ceilings, adjusting loan restrictions, or even rethinking the very foundation of HDB ownership, like the controversial 99-year lease system. Imagine a future where owning an HDB flat feels less like renting from the state and more like true ownership, or one where housing policies shift from market-driven models to citizen-first frameworks. The pressure to deliver fast, tangible results will be intense, because for many voters, fixing housing isn't just about economics. It's about restoring hope that Singapore is still a place where everyone can build a future. Freedom of expression has always been a carefully managed space in Singapore. Laws like POFMA, the Protection from Online Falsehoods and Manipulation Act, were introduced to combat misinformation, but they've also sparked heated debates about censorship and political control. If the opposition gains real power after GE 2025, one of the most symbolic and sensitive areas they might tackle is how Singapore handles free speech and media regulation. A potential government shift could bring about a review, softening, or even partial repeal of laws like POFMA. Instead of strict government interventions, we could see the rise of independent fact-checking bodies or new frameworks that allow for public debate without heavy-handed penalties. Why would they risk it? Because the youth vote is surging, and young Singaporeans are demanding a louder voice. They want transparency, openness, and the freedom to question narratives without fear of legal repercussions. Trust, not control, could become the new political currency. But change here won't come easy. There will be a delicate balance between promoting freer expression and maintaining Singapore's social harmony, especially in a diverse, multiracial society where misinformation can still spark real harm. In short, any easing of speech laws wouldn't just be a political move. It would be a signal to a new generation that their voices truly matter in shaping Singapore's future. 3. Labor laws and foreign workforce policies. Singapore's open economy has long depended on foreign workers, from tech industries to construction sites. But lately, middle-class Singaporeans have voiced growing frustrations, feeling sidelined, worried about job security, and anxious about climbing costs. If the opposition gains more ground in GE 2025, labor laws and foreign workforce policies could be one of the first major battlegrounds. Speculation is mounting that an opposition-led government might introduce stricter regulations on foreign labor quotas, ensuring that more jobs are reserved for Singaporeans. We could also see stronger protections for local workers, like priority hiring schemes, mandatory retraining opportunities, or even wage support systems to help locals stay competitive in a changing economy. It's not just political theater. Rising public pressure demands action. Many Singaporeans, especially mid-career professionals and fresh graduates, feel the job market has tilted too heavily in favor of foreign talent. If these concerns aren't addressed, it could erode trust in leadership and fuel deeper discontent. Still, policymakers would face a tricky balancing act. Singapore's prosperity hinges on being a global hub. Too many restrictions could scare off investors, multinationals, and top-tier talent. So the next government would need to tread carefully. Reform labor policies enough to reassure citizens without hurting the economic dynamism that keeps Singapore ahead. In a real way, how Singapore handles labor laws post-GE 2025 will send a strong signal, both to voters at home and businesses around the world, about 4. Political reforms and checks on power. Singapore's political system has long been admired for its efficiency, but criticized for its lack of opposition strength and limited checks on executive power. If GE 2025 sees a major shift, whether it's a stronger opposition bloc or even a new coalition, calls for political reforms could become impossible to ignore. One major area of speculation is the introduction of stronger institutional checks and balances. This could mean setting up independent watchdogs with more teeth, boosting the authority of parliamentary committees, or even revisiting how key appointments, like judges, senior civil servants, or election officials, are made to ensure transparency and fairness. Why does this matter? For a growing number of Singaporeans, especially younger and middle-aged voters, it's about trust. People want to believe that the system isn't just fast and efficient, but also fair, accountable, and future-proof. Recent global events, from democratic backsliding to corruption scandals elsewhere, have shown how easily trust in institutions can be lost if transparency isn't constantly reinforced. There's also a hunger for a more participatory political culture, where citizens feel they can influence policy, not just through voting once every few years, but through regular civic engagement, public consultations, and real debate. Of course, any political reform would face resistance. Singapore's stability is its brand, and too much disruption could spook investors or confuse a bureaucracy built on certainty. But modest, thoughtful reforms, framed not as a rejection of the past but as an evolution for the future, could actually strengthen Singapore's global standing as a modern, mature democracy. GE 2025 might just open the door to the next chapter of Singapore's political story. 5. Social welfare and income support programs. If the political winds shift after GE 2025, we could see a serious rethink of how Singapore handles social safety nets and income inequality. While Singapore has prided itself on its self-reliance model, there's been a growing debate, especially among younger voters and the working middle class, about whether the current system does enough to support vulnerable groups. Speculation is already building around potential expansion of social welfare programs. This could mean enhanced unemployment benefits, more generous healthcare subsidies, additional support for lower-income families, or even discussions around a basic minimum income for the most disadvantaged citizens. Why does this matter? Because rising costs, especially for essentials like housing, healthcare, and education, are squeezing everyday Singaporeans harder than before. Even in a wealthy country, the fear of falling through the cracks is real. A government perceived as ignoring these concerns could lose touch with a key voting bloc, the squeezed middle and younger generation. If a stronger opposition pushes the agenda, or if a new ruling coalition emerges, expect serious debates about wealth redistribution, retirement adequacy, and economic safety nets. However, Singapore would also need to tread carefully. Expanding welfare without clear sustainability could risk higher taxes or ballooning public debt, something that might unsettle investors and older, more fiscally conservative voters. Still, in a society that's evolving rapidly, a modernized, compassionate social contract could be the glue that keeps the nation cohesive in a more uncertain world. GE 2025 could redefine what fairness and support look like in Singapore's future. 6. Environmental policies and sustainability goals. As the world grapples with the realities of climate change, Singapore's environmental policies may see a dramatic shift post-GE 2025. The city-state has long been seen as a global leader in green technology, urban planning, and environmental sustainability. However, with growing public awareness around the urgency of climate change and sustainability, citizens are increasingly asking, is Singapore doing enough? Speculation. A potential shift could see stronger environmental regulations on industries that contribute heavily to carbon emissions, such as construction, transportation, and energy. We might also see the introduction of more aggressive carbon pricing, stricter waste management laws, or even policies that mandate corporations to disclose and reduce their environmental footprints. Why it matters. The rising concern over environmental issues, especially among younger voters and urban residents, means this topic is becoming politically urgent. The youth-led call for a greener future, combined with escalating challenges like rising sea levels, heat waves, and natural resource scarcity, means voters are placing increasing pressure on the government to act. However, this shift may come at a cost. Stricter environmental regulations could be seen as burdensome by certain industries, particularly those in the manufacturing and energy sectors. There's a delicate strike between sustainability and economic growth, especially in a city that thrives on global trade and business activities. Additionally, there may be a call for greater investment in green infrastructure, renewable energy sources, and sustainable transportation networks like electric vehicles and public transit systems. But perhaps the most crucial aspect, how will Singapore's position as a global financial hub be influenced by these changes? Will it maintain its appeal to international businesses, or will there be concerns over additional costs? Ultimately, how Singapore addresses environmental challenges could define its future competitiveness, both in terms of quality of life and its global economic position. After GE 2025, environmental policies may either be a catalyst for long-term prosperity or a source of public division, depending on how they're implemented. 7. Social welfare and retirement policies. As Singapore's population ages and the cost of living rises, reforming social welfare systems is becoming an increasingly hot topic. With a growing number of seniors and young families alike feeling the pinch, the next government may need to rethink how it supports its citizens, especially when it comes to retirement security, healthcare, and general social safety nets. Speculation. After GE 2025, there could be a shift towards increased government spending in social welfare programs, particularly to address the financial needs of an aging population. This might include expanding retirement savings schemes, such as tweaking the Central Provident Fund, CPF, and introducing subsidized healthcare plans for seniors. Additionally, public housing schemes might see reforms to ensure they remain affordable and accessible for both the elderly and younger generations just entering the workforce. Another possibility, universal basic income, UBI, or targeted financial support programs that help buffer the financial gaps caused by rising unemployment or underemployment, particularly in industries affected by automation and global competition. These kinds of reforms would be especially attractive to younger voters concerned about job stability in an uncertain economy. Why it matters. As the cost of living continues to outpace wage growth, social safety nets become increasingly critical in ensuring citizens' financial security. Singaporeans are living longer and thus need greater long-term retirement planning and care options. There's a growing fear that the current retirement system, though initially effective, will not suffice to sustain future generations. Further, many middle-class workers are starting to voice concerns that the current social policies favor the wealthy and overlook those in the lower and middle income brackets. A shift in policy direction could see the government allocating more resources to social programs aimed at economic redistribution, or, at the very least, adjusting existing programs to reflect the realities of the modern workforce and population demographics. Additionally, younger voters who are increasingly burdened with student debt and the high costs of housing may feel that reforming social welfare policies could alleviate some of these pressures. If the opposition party, if they gain traction in GE 2025, promises a stronger focus on social equity, it could resonate with the younger demographic who feel left behind by the current system. However, these potential changes come with financial implications. How will the government fund these new initiatives? Will higher taxes or the reallocation of existing resources be required? The trade-off between economic sustainability and social equity will certainly be one of the biggest debates moving forward. Ultimately, the future of social welfare policies in Singapore will be a defining feature of post-GE 2025 leadership, as it seeks to balance the needs of an aging population with the demands of a younger, increasingly diverse citizenry. Singapore's next election isn't just about who holds office, it could redefine the very rules of life for generations to come. From how we buy homes, to how freely we can speak, to how we prepare for retirement, the policies that follow GE 2025 might look very different from what we've always known. Some changes may be bold, others might unfold slowly, quietly shifting the ground beneath our feet. But one thing is clear: as Singapore evolves, its laws and the vision behind them must evolve too. Whether it's housing reforms, freer expression, labor protections, or a new approach to social welfare, the decisions made in the next few years could leave a legacy that shapes Singapore's future for decades. The question isn't just what will change, it's whether we are ready for the change when it comes. If you found this eye-opening, don't forget to like, subscribe, and tap the bell for more deep dives into the stories shaping our world. This is World Without Borders, where headlines meet